here with Fanatics View at the Radio Row at the Super Bowl in Phoenix, and I'm here with none other than the legendary Stephen Espinoza of Showtime Sports, Showtime Boxing, Showtime Championship Boxing. This man is the man when it comes to setting up some of the greatest boxing events that we have in today's boxing game. How are you doing? It's such an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us, Stephen.
Great to see you again. A pleasure to be here. Like a great atmosphere. Things are really picking up. I love the energy. Yeah.
Hey, this is one of my favorite people. It's literally like I'm in Houston, I'm in Dallas, and I always see Steven and his beautiful assistant girlfriend or wife, that they're always very humble and always very receptive to us media people and to the little people that are around, because they love the sport just as much as the rest of us. Now, since we are talking about the sport, we do have some big things coming up for Showtime in the next coming months, especially in March, when we do have the biggest pay-per-view of the year, to me, with the grudge match between BenavidezPlant and Benavidez. What are your thoughts on that, and how did that fight come together so quickly?
Look, I think, really what changed everything was Plant's knockout of Durrell. And that was, people said, well, how's he going to respond to losing to Canelo? Well, he came down a highlight reel knockout against a really tough Anthony Durrell. And, this is what's great about David Benavidez. David saw that and said, this is the time I want to fight him. When people, are most impressed by him, when he's just come off his strongest performance, when he's, had that highlight reel knockout, now people will understand that he's a challenging fighter. He's got power. Let's do it right now. This is the time to do it. So, look, those two guys, they've clearly been going back and forth with each other for years. And it's one of those fantastic things. It's a great style fight. But if you look back as a boxing fan, which I know you are, those fights that have that sort of emotional, personal rivalry, they stand out. They stand out against, if you talk about Mayweather, Diego Corrales, De La Hoya, Fernando Vargas, Marco Antonio Barrera, and Eric Morales. Like, those were fights that it wasn't just about pride or belt or position. Those were like grudge matches, and there's a different energy, and you get that energy around BenavidezPlant. It's just like, this is more than a fight. This is about something personal.
Now, we do have such a great, grudge match, rivalries, great talk back and forth. A lot of people are like, they were a little surprised that it was on pay-per-view. Can we go ahead and explain why a fight of this magnitude has to be on pay-per-view?
Yeah, the reality is it's always a conversation, and the question is, what does it take to get a fight done? Because the fighters, will require, they'll say, I'll do it for this, or I expect that. The reality is, and it's a really interesting question because it relates to sort of piracy. And we understand, that there are people who, don't really like the fact that it's pay-per-view. The reality, boxing is unlike UFC or MMA or anywhere else. In boxing, you're probably talking 80 to 90% of the revenues go to the fighter. So for us, it's not a huge moneymaker. Like, the network's not getting rich on this. The promoters are not getting rich on this. Really, 80 cents on the dollar are going to the fighters, as it should be. They're the ones taking the risk. They're the ones, having to step in the ring. So at the end of this, look, I think it's our job to make sure that we're putting on a quality fight card underneath it, and that is our responsibility. But I also believe, look, if you support these fighters and you support this kind of fight, you vote with your pocketbook, like everything else. If you don't like a fight that's on pay-per-view, don't buy it. If you want to see more of those types of fights, like a BenavidezPlant, well, this is the time to sort of vote with your pocketbook, and support those fighters that you're a fan of.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I just wanted to make sure I asked that question so it could be explained by you in the proper way, so people do understand exactly why this fight has to be on pay-per-view and why it's going to deliver on pay-per-view as well, too. Let's get down to those boys from Texas, the Charlo twins and Mr. Errol Spence Jr. What are the big plans coming up for them in 2023?
Well, look, there's a good possibility, Errol and Spence and Keith Thurman, will be in the ring later this spring. They've been circling each other, and that is a fight. I do think that there's still being attempts. So I know that there are attempts being made to see if Spence Crawford can still happen. We're not going to give up on that. But by the same token, Errol's, going to keep his career going. He's got to come back from, from the minor car accident that he had, wants to keep going. So I think, we'll be seeing that. In terms of the Charlos, look, having a little bit of bad luck with Jermell. We were supposed to have him on in January. He hurt his hand.
Right.
And Jamal has been taking care of some personal stuff. And look, I think the sport misses them. I mean, those are two dynamic fighters in the ring. They're big personalities outside the sport. The sport is better with the Charlos active. So I think we'll see both of them in the early summer, June, July. And, I can't wait. One of them's undisputed champion of the world, and we know how competitive they are. And I think, Jamal is going to really look for the big fights and try to follow in the footsteps of his brother and get an undisputed championship.
Well, that's beautiful stuff. And I'm gonna try to get a little bit of a leak a little bit. We got a fight that I feel is a super fight. I don't care what they say. Thurman Spence. This is the pinnacle fight for Spence because Thurman beat Danny Garcia, Sean Porter years ago. At one point, he was seen as the best welterweight in the world when he accomplished that. Now, where will this venue be, and what prospective dates do you have? Or do we have like a group of venues that you guys are looking at?
Yeah, we're still looking at venues. I would say that, if that fight comes together, it's probably here before the summer. I'd say late spring, early summer. Look, it could be, where Errol has made his home away from home or even his home at home. AT&T Stadium in Dallas. It's a phenomenal atmosphere. I know Keith wouldn't be worried about going in there. Keith is not worried about a hostile crowd. So that would be a natural. You could also see it in Vegas, but Vegas has got a really busy schedule. The assumption, obviously we've got BenavidezPlant in March. I am optimistic about Tank and Ryan in April. There could be a Canelo fight there in May. So all of a sudden, it's a busy boxing calendar. So I think it's good for the sport to see those big mega fights being spread out other places beyond Vegas, and especially somewhere like AT&T Stadium where you can have 40,000, 50,000 people there attending in person.
And I think that venue has been very good to Errol. And I think that it's always a good look. And you bring that up, and I remember we were all together a few years ago, his first headliner in the Jerry's World. And I thought that night was like a movie. Now, putting that fight together, how did you guys come about that deal? Because it was such a beautiful deal, putting that fight together and everything like that, and everything that went into that production.
These are pretty easy fights to make for the most part. Obviously, Crawford has been stop and start, but when you have someone with Errol who's recognized as by most people the best fighter in the division, it's not that hard to get people to fight him. So Keith Thurman wants the challenge. There's no problem there. Those guys, whether it's Mikey Garcia, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, they all want to test themselves against the best. So it sort of has flipped the other way. If you remember back at an earlier stage of Errol's career, he was having trouble getting that title fight. He was having trouble getting the big guys in the ring. He had to go over to the UK and fight Kell Brook on Kell Brook's home turf to get his title shot. And then all of a sudden the dynamic switches, and everybody is saying, look, I want to fight Errol, I want to fight the title fight, and he's open for business. He doesn't turn anybody down. So, look, I think, his goal is you probably clean out the division, and then, maybe there's a run at 154. We'll see. But I know Errol's got a lot left in him still at this stage.
All right, so we got these are the superstars, but Showtime still got a schedule, and Showtime got a big group. They got some big names on some of these fight cards coming up in February, especially ascending a star that I think he is, Ray Vargas. Ray Vargas is taking on Oshie. It's coming together at the Alamo Dome. What is the expectations for this fight? Crowd wise. Showtime wise, and what are you guys doing with Ray Vargas? Because Ray Vargas to me could be a multiple world champion in multiple divisions and be the next big star coming out of Mexico.
Look, San Antonio is a great fight town, and it sort of kills me. I wanted to come, be here Super Bowl week and San Antonio. Had to choose one or the other, and had some obligations here. But I'm definitely going to be like everybody else, right in front of my TV on Saturday night. Ray Vargas, trying his luck at 130. He was already the world titleist at 126, and it's not an easy opponent in Foster. But you're right. I think he is quietly one of the probably most underrated fighters in the sport. So I'm anxious to see how he looks at 130. He's always been sort of a lean, skinny guy. He may be even stronger and better at 130. And if he's there, look, there's plenty of talent. There's lots of talent at 130. So if he's successful, I think he stays at 130, and we'll see a long run there of some really high-level fights.
I have one more boxing question, and I know you're gonna probably be like, Pop, I'm gonna get you later, but this is the biggest talk in boxing. How close are we to Ryan and Tank?
Look, I get it. There's a part of boxing fans, and I think it's part of all sports, but even more in boxing. Boxing fans live and die on every little, development. A guy posts an emoji, and someone like, well, does that mean the fight's falling apart, or this rumor, that rumor? So there's been sort of this soap opera around it. I've never really doubted, ever since we had the framework in place, I believe back in November, I've never doubted that the fight's going to happen. And I'm still very, very optimistic. I was working on it this morning. I was working on it on the fight last night, here. And we're definitely getting closer. So I know there's been some concern. Boxing fans are saying we're going to lose another big one. I don't think so. And the reason why is Tank and Ryan aren't going to let this fall apart. They're not going to let their promoters, their advisors, talk about anything else. So when you have two guys who are really committed to it, then the rest of us have no choice but to work it out. Because like Ryan said as recently last night on social media, there were some rumors about his promoter looking to put Ryan in a different fight. Ryan immediately went and gave a couple interviews and said, I don't care what rumors are out there. This is the fight. And I think boxing fans appreciate that. A fighter like Tank, like Ryan, taking the career into his own hands, insisting on that big fight. So I think, when April 15 rolls around, we're going to see Tank and Ryan in the ring in Vegas. And I think, one of the biggest fights in the year, some people prefer BenavidezPlant, others Tank Ryan. I think they're both fantastic fights. The fact that we're going to get both of them within 3 weeks of each other, and then maybe a few weeks after that, something like Spence Thurman. I mean, it's a phenomenal spring.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now, we got another combat sport that's huge here. Just tell us a little bit about Bellator real quick before I let you go.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a long history in MMA. Bellator just came off this past weekend a CBS show. It's the first time that CBS has had MMA in 10 years. Really successful show. We saw the last fight ever from Fedor. And Bellator is... probably has its strongest talent base that we've ever seen them have. So in terms of, we all know that UFC, is the 800-pound gorilla. But, knowledgeable MMA fans know that, all the talent isn't just solely in the UFC. Bellator has a lightweight tournament going on. And I think that group of 8 lightweight fighters is the best group of lightweight fighters in anywhere in the sport. So as we go forward, guys with AJ